When we think of a currency collapse, we imagine chaos, hyperinflation, empty shelves, panic in the streets. But what if the most devastating collapse of all was the one nobody noticed? For 30 years, a major currency was dying, not with a bang, but with a whisper. No headlines, no riots, no breaking news, just a slow, silent erosion, hidden in plain sight. Tonight, we reveal the story of a collapse that changed millions of lives, and almost nobody saw it coming. A currency collapse isn't always a sudden event. Sometimes it's a process, a slow-motion disaster that unfolds over decades. But what does it really mean for a currency to collapse? It means trust is lost. It means the money in your pocket buys less and less. It means savings evaporate and the rules of the game change. But the most dangerous collapse is the one that S hidden, the one that S disguised as normal. For years, everything seemed fine. The currency was stable on the surface. People went to work, got paid, bought groceries. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. Inflation was creeping up. Debt was piling higher. Wages weren't keeping pace. But the changes were slow, so slow that most people didn't notice. It's like boiling a frog. If you turn up the heat slowly, the frog never jumps out. To understand how this collapse began, we have to go back to the decisions made decades earlier. It started with a promise: growth without pain, prosperity without sacrifice. Governments borrowed more, central banks printed more, and everyone believed the good times would last forever. But every shortcut has a cost. And that cost was quietly accumulating, building up pressure beneath the calm surface of the economy. The seeds of the silent collapse were sown in policies that prioritized short-term gain over long-term stability. The tipping point wasn't a single event, but a series of small fractures that began to widen. A housing bubble that felt like a boom. A stock market surge fueled by cheap credit. These were celebrated as signs of a healthy economy, but they were symptoms of the underlying sickness. When people started noticing that their grocery bills were getting a little higher each month, or that their dream house was suddenly unaffordable, they dismissed it. That's just how things are, they'd say. The warning signs were everywhere, but they were easy to ignore. The truth was masked by rising asset prices and the constant reassurance from officials that everything was under control. This brings us to the 30-year period of this silent decline. Let's call it the Great Deception. From the early 90s to the late 2010s, while the world watched other economies experience dramatic crises, this one simply faded. It wasn't about one bad decision, but thousands of them. A little more debt here, a slight increase in the money supply there. Each step was so small it seemed insignificant. But over 30 years, the cumulative effect was catastrophic. The purchasing power of the currency was cut in half, then in half again. A lifetime of savings could no longer guarantee a comfortable retirement. A generation grew up believing that working harder for less money was normal. Think about it this way. If your house had a termite problem, you wouldn't see it at first. The foundation looks solid, the walls are standing strong, but inside, the wood is being eaten away, piece by piece. By the time you notice a crack in the wall, the structural damage is already immense. This is what happened to the currency. The termites were inflation and debt, and for 30 years, they feasted on the foundations of the economy while everyone admired the paint job. Political leaders from all sides participated, kicking the can down the road, hoping the problem wouldn't explode on their watch. So who was to blame? It's easy to point fingers at politicians or central bankers, and they certainly bear responsibility. They made the choices that put the economy on this path. But the truth is more complicated. We were all part of it. We voted for the promises of easy prosperity. We took on the cheap debt to buy cars and homes. We enjoyed the short-term benefits without asking about the long-term costs. It was a collective delusion, a shared belief that the laws of economics could be suspended indefinitely. The silence wasn't just a failure of the media, it was a failure of collective attention. The human cost of this slow-motion collapse has been immense, yet it's rarely discussed in those terms. It's measured in postponed retirements, in young people unable to afford a family, in the quiet stress of living paycheck to paycheck. It's the story of a grandfather who saved diligently his whole life, only to find his nest egg wouldn't cover his medical bills. It's the story of a small business owner who couldn't keep up with rising costs and had to close their doors. These aren't just economic statistics. They are millions of individual tragedies, playing out in silence, hidden behind the facade of a functioning society. Now, as the cracks are too big to ignore, people are waking up. They're realizing that the game has been rigged. The trust that holds a currency together is fracturing. What happens next is uncertain. Will there be a sudden, chaotic correction? Or will the slow decline continue, further eroding the wealth and security of millions? The lesson of this 30-year collapse is clear. The most dangerous threats are often the ones you don't see. They build slowly, quietly, until it's too late. The story isn't over. In fact, we might be living in its most critical chapter right now. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world.